The eruption of fighting in Western Equatoria State has increased the state of instability and sown the seeds of political misunderstandings. In addition, with recent floodings in parts of Upper Nile, what impact is it having on the population? Join us as we discuss this and more only on Beyond the Headlines. Our guest on the program is Mr. Edmund Yakani, the Executive Director of Community Empowerment for Progress Organization, abbreviated as a CEPO. Mr. Yakani has extensive experience in research on security sector reform, governance, human rights, rule of law, and gender. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you for hosting me in your program.
Over the past few weeks, reports of conflict has emerged from Tambora and the surrounding area in Western Equatoria State. Who is fighting and what led to the conflict?
Thank you very much. Just to let your viewers to know who I am in relation to Tambora issues, I was one of the mediator right from day one when violence erupted in Tambora, and the initial violence was a communal tension between two ethnic groups that are the indigenous citizens of Tambora. These are mainly Zander and the Balanda. It was a small-scale disagreement over issues related to political tension over administration of Tambora between the Balandas and the Zanders. So these have taken up almost like 2 months. From 2 months, it became very clear that it became a political motivated tension with the two armed groups fighting on ethnic line. One armed group is forces that belongs to General James Nando, and forces that belongs to the SPLA-IO, which is under direct command of the current governor of Western Equatoria State, Alfred Futuyo. So these can results as back to history. Futuyo and James Nando were being commanders of IO forces during the crisis in 2013 until the signing of the peace agreement in 2018. And later on, James Nando defected from IO as a deputy to the current governor, Alpha Futuyo, to join the South Sudan People's Defense Force, that's SSPDF, under the command of His Excellency President Salva Kiir Mayardit. But the presence of James Nando forces still remain in Tambora, and IO are in Tambora. So the tension over the political administration of Tambora between the Balanda and the Zanders have reached to the scale that it attracts the Zanders and the Balandas to use the formal organized forces, weaponry and ammunitions. So you come to realize that the Zander are much more lean to forces that belong to James Nando, who is supposed to be a part of SSPDF forces to reallocate his forces out of Tambora to Meridi. And you have SPLA-IOs, which are under the command of the current incumbent governor of Western Equatoria State, Alfred Futuyo, whom are in Tambora, and they're supposed to reallocate from Tambora to their official base in Rilango as a cantonment site for the SPLM forces. So that is how the tension started, is a political competition over the administration of Tambora, but it has reached to three main issues. One particular party to the conflict want to change the history of Tambora, and this particular is that the history of Tambora in terms of paramount chief in the ancient history, it is owned by the Zanders, but there's some few political elites from Tambora, from the Balanda in Tambora, claiming also they want to have a seat of a paramount chief. And back history, Tambora is a Zander who brought or who attracted the Balandas to join the population of Zander in Tambora. And in history, during the colonial time, he gave Balandas only the seat of sub-chief, while he's a chief as a Zander chief. So Balanda saying they're tired of being sub-chief in Tambora, they want to be also to occupy the seat of the paramount chief. And that's why you see the paramount chief of Tambora is under attack from time to time. His house was attacked, was burned, he was displaced, he went for refuge, he was being followed up to where he have taken refuge. So as we're speaking now, he is in the bushes, he's not in the town of Tambora as a paramount chief. But also I feel elites at the Yambio level, at Juba level, were taking the advantage of the friction among the Zander and the Balanda communities to pursue certain political gains by using the violence. And my sister, one thing I want to say is becoming a common trend in South Sudan, that politicians are using violence as a ladder to power. So as we're speaking, the impact of the violence on the population, both Balanda and Zander, is huge in Tambora. If you wish me to go to details, I will go.
Yes, I want us to go back to the point that you stated that the conflict started as an intercommunal fighting. What caused the conflict to actually erupt?
Actually, the conflict erupts when the seat of paramount chief is contested by the Balandas. They say since ancient history, Zanders have been the paramount chief. So they want to have their own paramount chief of Balanda in Tombra. And this is fueled by what? This is fueled by the forces of IO, a Balanda majority, Zander minority, and specifically after defection of James Nando from IO, he have reduced the numbers of Zander in terms of boots in the force of the IO, which is right now under the command of the current governor, Alfred Futuyo. So as Balanda were claiming for their political representation in Tombra, they realized that at the current moment, they are powerful, they are fighting force of the IO, they have ammunition, they have power, so they start asserting themselves by using that advantage of having a power that they have gained by being forces to IO and a dominant against the Zander, who are minority, and who much of the force of Zanders within the IO have moved along with defection of James Nando. So that's how the confrontation begins.
As you have stated, the conflict in Western Equatoria State appears to have taken a tribal dimension with the Azande and Balanda engulfed conflict. Accusations have been brought against the governor of Western Equatoria State, Governor Alfred Futuyo. According to a report, when Governor Alfred Futuyo was in the bush as a rebel leader, he signed an agreement with the Seleka and Ambororo to join him to expel the Azande off of their ancestral land and establish a new state for their tribe in return for mineral resources such as gold, diamonds, and forestry products. The Azande have intercepted a map from Balanda of the new planned state, which includes some areas in Yambio. The copy of the map is in the record. This is what angered General James Nando, who is from the Azande ethnic group, to defect in 2020 to the SSPDF. Honorable Futuyo has been working day and night to achieve the above vision. Now, is this the case in terms of what is happening within the state?
The facts remain when 28 states were created, Tombra became a state. And when Tombra became a state, it is administered by a governor who is a Zander, and that is General Patrick Zamoy was the sort of like a leading governor of Tombra State, and he's from Zanders. There were accusations leveled against him that he intentionally targeted Balanda, which I've never seen evidence against this accusation that were leveled against Patrick Zamoy. Based on that, as by then Patrick Zamoy as a governor, the accusation that was laid on him that he targeted the Balanda, and that what made General Futuyo to join the IO as an opposite force to the government and start fighting the government of Patrick Zamoy. And in the process of that fighting, of course, IO in Tombra, bordering Central African Republic, bordering Sudan, and bordering part of DRC have to survive. And to survive, they have to build some regional alliances, which I think could have been one of the facts that is behind the concept of the map. So as a mediator on the ground in Tombra, I have come across the map. Some people show me the map. I've seen it physically with my own eyes as a data that is going among the communities, specifically the Azandes on the ground. They say, this is a new map. And I ask them, how will this map be made, can be made real, or how can the vision behind this map can be realized? And they say the methodology for translating this vision into reality is that Futuyo have reached to an agreement with the Seleka, which is a Christian militia group of Central Africa fighting the Anti-Balaka, which is an Islamic group in Central Africa, have reached an agreement with the Seleka to reinforce his presence on the ground and flush out the Zandes from Tombra, and that the same thing was being done by the Umbororo. And Umbororo is a nomadic tribe which is moving between the Central and East African countries. So from Niger to Nigeria to Central Africa to Chad to South Sudan, Umbororo to Sudan even, Umbororo were moving around that territory because the pastoralists who are nomads, who are moving from one country to another, they don't care about borders. So that particular group also have reached an agreement with Futuyo. So Futuyo have attracted the Seleka, which is an armed militia group of Christians in Central Africa, and then Umbororo, which are pastoralists who are nomads who move from one country to another, that they have reached an agreement to build a force for flashing out Zanders out of Tombra. And in return is that the Seleka and the Umbororo will have access. For example, Umbororo will have access to grazing land for keeping their cattle in Tombra, while for the Seleka, they have access to the minerals, as I've said. But whether I have seen a physical evidence of that agreement, I've not seen it. I've not seen a really written agreement that I've seen physical that I can have as an evidence to justify the allegations against Futuyo. But in terms of verbal messaging, you can hear from the people saying, oh, there's an agreement reached by ASEM. Where is the physical agreement? Who have the agreement? Can I see the content of the agreement? Have the agreements? I couldn't find the agreement, but the map, physical, I've seen the map. It is a hand-drawn map that sort of like really expand the territory of Balanda control. And that become as an aspiration that the Zanders were saying was designed by the current governor to achieve a state that is a Balanda state in Western Equatoria State. And actually, even as far as speaking with you, the accusation that the Balandas in Tombra are attracting the same ethnic group of Balanda from Western Baragazali State, that's specifically from Wow, to come and join them in wiping out the Zanders. This particular information is more verbal. There's no written evidence that you can prove it as a crime or as evidence that is laid against the governor or Balanda as a community. But the map, as I said, I've seen it.
Now, are there any Balandas from Wow now coming to Tombora? Has there been a migration of any form taking place?
You can see evidence in the sense that Zander say they can't leave from Tombora to Wow. And I've come across physical evidence that when Zanders were leaving from Tombora to Wow, they're always targeted. And why? Because most of the military garrison or military stations between Tombora and Wow are IO forces dominant. That has been going on that I've seen as a line of what I get it as a physical proof. And that justifies to you that if you're Zander moving from Tombora to Wow, you realize that your life is under attack. And there's a case of a wife and husband leaving Tombora, going to Wow, and the wife was a Balanda, the husband was a Zander, the husband was killed, and the wife was allowed to move to Wow. That's a physical evidence that I've come across. I've spoken to this woman. So that evidence make a lot of Zanders justify. That is clear that Balandas are migrating from Tombora, from Wow, coming to Tombora to aid their colleagues and fight them as a Zanders.
A report emerged that on Monday, September 6th, Governor Futuyo ordered his SPLA-IO forces in Namutina to come to Tombora to attack the forces of General James Nando. His phone conversation was tapped and recorded saying, "I want you to come to Tombora today to do the last destruction. I want to see Tombora burned down into ashes." After the fight, 2 dead bodies of Seleka soldiers was discovered among the dead bodies of close to 27 SPLA-IO casualties. The report went on to state that President Salva Kiir has made attempts to get in contact with Governor Futuyo and encouraged him to come to Juba to address the conflict that is occurring in Western Equatoria State. But Governor Futuyo has yet to meet with the president. What is the national government doing about the ongoing conflict in the state? And is Governor Futuyo intentionally avoiding to meet with the president?
Obviously, Governor Futuyo was asked by the president to come to Juba. He refused to come. For what reasons, many doesn't know, but I'm quite sure he has his own personal reasons as a governor, as a leader at the state level, why he doesn't want to report to come to Juba. And of course, around the concepts in Juba is that there's a focus from the government to declare a state of emergency, specifically targeting Western Equatoria because of the incident in Tombora. Maybe we believe one of the call is for this call for state of emergency. And of course, someone like me also, I support that there's a need to demilitarize Tombora. There's a need to either declare state of emergency as an alternative. Maybe that's the reason why what made Governor Futuyo not to report to Juba for the call of the president. But also the government have sent a body called Joint Defense Board. Joint Defense Board is a mechanism that was designed under the peace agreement as a South Sudanese parties mechanism to discipline the military and to keep the ceasefire hold. So now the Joint Defense Board team is in Tombora for demilitarizing Tombora. By demilitarizing, what do I mean? I mean they have gone to the ground to make sure that the forces of General James Nando have to leave Tombora to Meridi based under SSPDF because he is completely under SSPDF, and the IO forces in Namtina have to move and join the IO base in Rilango. But in regard to the fighting that has happened, yes, when General James Nando went to reallocate his forces from Tombra to Meridi, he falls under numerous attack. And these attacks, normally people ask who are the one attacking them. And it's not a simple attack. Actually, right from Yambio town, his house was attacked. He was not around in the house. On his way to Tombra, he almost faced 2 or 3 attacks. And when he was in Tombra, also he faced attacks in Tombra. So people ask who are attacking General James Nando. And it's clear evidence are coming that it's IO forces that are attacking General James Nando. The question is the taped recording of Governor Futuyo, whether it's been displayed for consumption of the public. I've never heard about it, but it's been trading in reports that he is being recorded speaking on phone, authorizing IO's forces to attack General James Nando. And General James Nando have resisted. And also, as evidence, I have seen the bodies of the Seleka trading in social media by several sources reporting that these are Selekas that have been killed in the front line. And I go online Googling, doing a lot of online research. I prove, yes, the body resembled forces of Seleka, and the body indicated that where they've been killed on Google research, they are killed in Tombra. So as I say, physically, they are Seleka, but the way they are killed in Tombra. Through Google research, I found that evidence is true in terms of where is the data coming from. So I've seen those bodies, but whether Seleka in big numbers behind the IO, that is another question that need to be investigated.
What impact have these forces had on the lives of the civilian population in Western Equatoria State? Also, how many villages have been impacted by the conflict? And what is the estimated number of people that have been displaced by the insecurity?
First, of all the villages around Tombra have been really burned down. I would say it around 5 to 6 villages that are badly disturbed by the violence around Tombra. And this has led to displacement of over 80,000 internal displaced persons. And this is officially confirmed by UN OCHA when UN OCHA sent a team on the ground. And also based on the UN OCHA report that confirmed 80,000 persons were displaced, UN OCHA confirmed over 680 children who are unaccompliceed. Either their parents who have been killed in the crisis or they lost where their parents are. So this is a magnitude that has happened. And over 170 persons were killed. And incidents of rape have increased. Based on my own independent verification, we have registered over 15 cases of gang rapes among women and girls in Tombra. And actually huge number of houses, over 300 plus houses, were burned. And also the forces that were attacking the communities or attacking the villages are destroying crops. We can estimate to a huge number of around, maybe we can say over 1,000 acres of expected harvest of food produce are destroyed. So it means what is going to happen is that even if you stop the violence now, people are not going to have food because the food that they expect to harvest in this agricultural season is already destroyed by those forces. They have been burned down or cut down. So you're going to have 2 shocks of the violence that have created dire humanitarian need for 80,000 people who are facing challenges of shelter, of food, of clean water, of medicine. And for children, it's a rainy season in Tombra, question of increase of mosquitoes, diarrhea, because due to poor hygiene is very high. If you mitigate this, if you are able to resolve this, in terms of the 80,000 IDPs returning back to the villages, they're going to face hunger because their farms are also destroyed. This is the level of huge impact that the violence have created on the civilian population in Tombra.
Last week, Western Equatoria State Governor Alfred Futuyo and the first Vice President, Dr. Riek Machar, agreed to relocate the SPLA-IO forces to Namatina and Zamoy to Rirangu and Maridi to pave the way for a peace and reconciliation conference in Tambura. When will the relocation of the forces take place, and what do you know about the steps that are being taken so far to relocate the soldiers?
This concept of the relocation, which falls under the concept of demilitarizing Tombra as we're speaking now, already a high delegation of Joint Defense Board, the JDB, are in Tombra as we're speaking for the last 1 week, and we are able to create for the last 1 week, there's no military confrontation among the forces. So what to the best of my knowledge, per the data I have today, early morning today, is that James Nando forces will be relocated out of Tombra to SSPDF under Division 6 in Meridi. So all James Nando forces will be wiped out of Tombra, taken to SPDF base in Meridi. And IOs have been prepared to leave Namtina based, which is an illegal cantonment site, for them to go to the official identified cantonment site in Rilango. So there's already a joint force on the ground composed of SSPDF, SPLA-IO, and other armed forces to reallocate. And as we're speaking also with you right now, as a government team is on the ground under the JDB CITISAM, which is a mechanism of regional force and with regional representation, are already also on the ground with a delegation to move to ensure that the reallocation or the demilitarization of Tombra is taking place. So it means you have now the government on the ground working on reallocating the forces, but also regional mechanism of IGAD called CITSAM on the ground. And as we're speaking with you now, we're expecting on Thursday, a high UN delegation is going to go to Tombra to witness also the element of the reallocation led by the United Nations SRG, the head of UNUMIS, Hayson Feng will go there, and a person from New York, the Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping, also will join the team. So it will be a high UN delegation with the presence of UN Security Council to go and witness the reallocation of the forces that belong to IO and General James Nando out of Tombra to the locations that, as you have mentioned, by the agreement between the first Vice President and Governor General Futuyo of the IO, which is a governor of Western Equatoria State.
You have called on the United Nations mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, to provide a safe passageway by deploying UNMISS soldiers, thus enabling the population to secure food. What is the state of the humanitarian situation on the ground right now?
Right now, the situation is dire. It's a dire. There's no distribution of food, and there's no any presence of humanitarian agencies. Actually, to our nightmare, when the violence were active, completely there's no presence of UN. Now, when we're getting information that a delegation has come from New York with a leadership that headed by the Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping is going to visit Tombra, we have seen now presence of the humanitarian agencies. And that's why now you see UN OCHA is so active, but the early days there's absence of UN agents, humanitarian agents on the ground. But because now there's a high delegation of UN living going to Tombra, UN agents are now getting to the ground, humanitarian agents are getting to the ground. I know the agent that I know is doing something a bit later on the ground was UNCR in the early days, was trying to identify the most vulnerable population. UNCR was trying to help, that is children and elderly and sick people. UNCR was working with them, but then was so small. So as we're speaking right now, the humanitarian situation is in dire need. There's a need to provide humanitarian assistance to the population.
Due to the surge in violence, UNMISS with CEPO and other organizations held a 3-day peace workshop in Tombra. Participants at the workshop raised concerns over the number of weapons in and around Tombra. A youth representative named Santina Gabriel stated that the youth in the area are being instigated to fight amongst themselves by certain people within the society. You were part of the 3-day peace workshop in Tombra. Who were the groups that were also part of the workshop? What were the key issues that were addressed? And what resolutions so far have been implemented at the grassroots level that was part of the agenda of the workshop itself?
Yes, I was the main facilitator of the workshop between my organization, CEPO, in partnership with UNMIS and Intra-Religious Committee, or which is a committee of religious leaders from both faith of Christian faith and Muslims faith. They join us all together. The dialogue brought around 80 persons into the conference, and both these are coming from, these participants are coming from women, youth, religious leaders, traditional authority, county authority, and you have the law enforcement agencies, police and the military into the workshop. We mainly focus on what defines the underlying factors for triggering the violence. And of course, they mentioned 3 main underlying factors. One is a change of history in Tombra. And this link with the question that I've mentioned before, or the issue I've mentioned before around the ownership of paramount chief seats between the Balandas and Zanders. They have brought out, that's one of the issues. Secondly, also they have said it is the lack of accelerating the security arrangements under the revitalized peace agreement have made the forces, whether IO or SSPDF, turn their guns against civilians for means of survivable. But also they believe that political elites at the Juba level, at Yambio level, are triggering the violence because they want to use the violence as a way for them to be heard or as a ladder to climb to a political seat. Those are the reasons I've mentioned. One of the key resolutions that came out of the meeting was really the demilitarization of Tombra, or relocation of James Nando forces and IO forces out of Tombra, which right now is undergoing implementation to the best of my knowledge. The other one is that they call for dialogue, that they need a dialogue among themselves, Balandas and Zander, and specifically targeting the youth that are armed from both ethnic groups from Zander and the Balandas to come together to talk. We tried 2 weeks after the dialogue, we tried to bring the youth, and we held a meeting among the youth of Balanda and Zande. So we held a meeting among the women of Balanda and Zande. We held those meetings, but those meetings were watered down when the tension escalated by too much rumors that are mainly going from Juba or Yambio to the communities on the ground in Balanda, both from elites of Zande, from elites of Balanda. They've been calling the youth, they've been calling the women that don't consider the outcome of those meetings. These is meetings that were designed against our dominance in Tombra. That's the same message elites from Balanda sending to Balanda, elites from Zande are sending to Zande, and they renew or they resume the confrontation among themselves.
Who are some of the elites that are undermining the dialogue and really instigating this conflict?
You know, you can't really level the names here particularly, but I will tell you one practical case study. We are in the meeting. As we're going on, we're reaching to resolutions. One elite called from Juba. I asked the person to tell me, so no, I can't tell you, but this is an elite. So he called from Juba and asking the one member of the meeting, in which stage are you now? Then the member reported, we are drawing resolutions. Then he wanted to dictate the resolutions. And this particular participant was honest, and he put the phone on loudspeaker. I started saying, please stop it. You are speaking from Juba. We are suffering with the violence on the ground. We can't take your recommendations. We have our own. And that participant was honest to the rest, and he opened his phone on loudspeaker, and you can see him confronting with an elite from Juba. When I ask him, what's the name of this person? He say, just for sake of confidentiality, they can't tell, but he wanted to show us a practical case that now one of his community elite is calling from Juba to doctor outcomes of the resolutions. And he told him, I will never take your recommendations. We as a community on the ground here, we have been coexisting peacefully for long. You can't destroy our peaceful coexistence, our social cohesion, our social fabric. You can't destroy it by your own recommendations that are evil from Juba. And that's a practical example. The whole room laughter, and all of them started making testimony that we have been receiving this calls, not you alone, but we flash it back. So it's a clear indication that elites that are based in Juba and in Yambio are fueling the violence on the ground.
Now, someone would look at the situation in Western Equatoria State as isolated at the state level. How does this impact the nation itself? And what is the significance of the conflict in Western Equatoria State at the national level?
It is huge at national level. First, it has affected the build-up of the security institutions between Balandas and Zandes at national level. Being friends from same state together, now, because of the crisis on the ground in Tombra, they have to be split up on their ethnic lines. And you can hear statements of some generals, whether in the law enforcement agencies, which come from two disparate communities, who want to decide to go to the ground to enforce their ethnic protection or their ethnic safety and security. That's how it affects. And also it affects, you can hear in the inauguration of the National Parliament, the speaker made it very clear, because that is one of her constituency. Our right honorable speaker comes from there, and she made it very clear in the inauguration of the parliament in front of the president that what is going on in Tombra is inhuman, is unaccepted, and she was the national to respond to. So you can see things are happening in Tombra, but inauguration of a national parliament, Tombra agenda is a first priority during the speech of the speaker of the parliament, who actually come from Tombra because she feel her home, her constituency is bleeding while she is a national speaker at national level. So that's how it affects the national politics, it affects the national dynamics, and it shapes opinion of elites or political leaders who are occupying national seats that come from Tombra, plus their friends that may sympathize with them. So that's how it shakes, and it became a big debate, and that's why was able to emerge in Tombra look isolated. If the president is thinking about declaring state of emergency because of Tombra, if the president is calling the governor, it's not for the first time, they've been called almost more than twice to Juba between the governor and the deputy governor, both of them have been called. So that tells you, though it looks isolated, but it's causing a pain at the center of the government, which is based in the seat of the government in Juba.
Now, you've been quite a very busy individual traveling all across South Sudan. You're recently in Unity State, in Upper Nile State, and also in Lake State. Can you please give our audience an overview of what is occurring in the 3 states that you've visited so far? Starting with Unity State, where you saw the firsthand the devastation of the flood that is taking place.
Unity State, I will say 4 counties of Unity State are completely cut off from the seat of the government base in Bentiu. These 4 states are completely affected by the floods, and the population in those 4 counties are migrating to highland, and they have a limited highland spaces to accommodate all the population. And they're facing a lot of problems. Among them is snake bites, because the increase of the floods has made the population of snakes come closer to human settlement. And there's an incidence of snake bites are very high. And likely we're going to witness a high death rate of elderly children from malaria and diarrhea. This would happen, but also the population have lost their crops, their food produced. So hunger likely is going to affect this population in the highlands as they're taking refuge from the floods. But there's no any public statement from the national government about the impact of the floods on huge population of Unity State, which is, I can say, over thousands, over 50,000 individuals who are affected by these floods. And it really affects both the human, it's also affect the livestock. And you know, the livelihood of the population in Unity State is so much depending on the livestock. So the livestock also, cattle, goats, sheep are dying.
Now you were in Malakal in Upper Nile State. What is taking place on the ground in Malakal?
Malakal, of course, it's one of the most affected seat of the government in Upper Nile State. Livelihood is still very hard. Access is very hard because there's no real access in terms of roads, in terms of the water transportation. One thing I've discovered in Malakal is that the water transportation system is having huge illegal roadblocks. The movement of things like barges or ships from the border of Ethiopia to bring food from Ethiopia to Malakal, if a barge that coming, this barge have to face 35 illegal roadblocks. Almost every paramount chief have a roadblock that he has to charge against the boat that have increased pricing in Malakal town. And that's why when I was in Malakal, after I came back to Juba, I raised an alarm and calling national government that those roadblocks need to be really sort of like removed or dismissed. And at least customs director responded today by ordering that all the illegal roadblocks along the river have to be cleared by accessing Malakal or taking commodities from Malakal. From Juba to Malakal, you have over 150 illegal roadblocks. So commodity price in Malakal is very, very expensive because of these roadblocks. But also, you know, Malakal is under fear or under tension of what is happening between the IO forces, between the forces of the former chief of staff of IO, Gatwich, and the Riek Machar forces, which of course, you know, Malakal having huge presence of IO. Olong is in the other side and Riek force on the other side, and they have continuous confrontation in a place called Maganis as a front line between the IO forces that are loyal to Riek Machar and IO forces loyal to the former chief of staff. And that has caused a bit of panic within Malakal town. But the town is stable and town is peaceful, but pricing is it's a very expensive city right now, as you're saying. You need to spend almost $2.5 or $3 to buy a bottle of water in Malakal.
That is expensive.
Yes.
Now, you just came back from Lake State and you met with the governor there, the new governor. What is the situation in Lake State currently?
The situation is really stable, and the level of insecurity through what is termed as a known source of violence in Rumbek, what is called cattle raiding among the communities of Lake State and revenge attack, it have scaled down. And because I've been following Rumbek for the last 5 years closely, before the presence of the current governor on the ground, at least you may register incidents, 3 to 4 incidents of cattle raiding or revenge attack that may claim 10 to 15 lives of innocent civilians daily in Rumbek. But now when the governor went, at least the level of incidents have dropped completely. You can have at least 1 full week without hearing incident of cattle raiding or revenge attack. And before the governor goes on the ground, we have office on the ground. I ask my staff, what have you seen as a difference between the leadership of the current governor and the former governor? They told me in the leadership of the former governor, by 7, they have to look where they're taking their sleep. So they have to go to their houses in order to sleep by 7 p.m. But currently I was with them at least by 11, 12 p.m. still people hanging around. So that shows you clearly how the current leadership of the government have impacted positively in reducing level of insecurity. But my fear is South Sudan top leadership is very opposite. Sometimes a successful governor like that will quickly be removed and replaced, and then another governor is appointed, and then the scale of insecurity scale up. And my appeal through this platform that you have provided for me is asking His Excellency President to keep current governor to stay in Rumbek for a bit longer period. He shouldn't be removed in order for us to witness relative peace, because Rumbek is one of the cities that is a forgotten city. Since 2005 until independence, after independence, communities are killing themselves. The center authority in Juba is quiet. Nobody talk about it and nobody have intervention. But at least God has blessed us with a governor that was able to reduce the scale of the violence to a level that is minimum, I can say. But I will not say completely have to stop it, but at least it's at level right now at a minimum scale.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Edmund Yakani, for joining me here on the program. Mr. Yakani is the Executive Director of Community Empowerment for Progress organization, abbreviated as CEPO. Thank you for joining me here on Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you too, and thank you for providing the platform.
Thank you.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube page at Sunrise Media.